So I recently did a video on whether or not a narcissist or a malignant narcissist is just a difficult person or if they are bad and evil or insidious. If you haven't seen that video, make sure you check it out. But today I thought I would focus on a victim of narcissistic abuse and what we have in common. And it hurts. It hurts to kind of look at some of these things, I'm not going to lie. It's so much easier to kind of look at the other person and realize all the things that they've done wrong, all the things that they did that were hurtful and abusive. And while I don't want to put any blame, right, on victims of narcissistic abuse, I do want to highlight the responsibility that we all have in stopping abuse, in stopping the cycle of being in relationships that have the same pattern, okay? And so it starts with looking inside. So I made a list of about 15 things that victims of narcissistic abuse have in common. And the point is that if we can start looking inside, if we can shift our focus, then we can start doing the real healing. Right? Because if our focus is only on the other person, then we're not taking responsibility of what we can do to make sure that it never happens again. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. Let's get started. Something that victims of narcissistic abuse have in common is that they all have a shame wound. Now, this wound can be dormant when you meet the narcissist. And I've met a lot of people that told me, you know, Michelle, I met this person. If I had a shame wound, it was from the past and I was fine. I was like in the best place of my life when I met this person. And yes, that can be very true. But the reality is that if we had a shame wound from our past that we never healed, then malignant narcissists can sense that. You know, when we think about like attracts like, narcissists at their core are full of shame. So it's almost like a magnetic attraction and they pick up on it. Victims of narcissistic abuse also often feel more comfortable being what someone else needs or wants as opposed to being their authentic self. Now, this isn't something done on a conscious level. So what that might look like is in conversations, right, with their friends. They may feel more comfortable getting their friend to do all the talking, showing interest in their friend and kind of shying away from the spotlight on them. You know, if someone says, what do you want to do? It's always, oh, whatever you want. And always kind of being what the other person needs. They're more comfortable as opposed to being their authentic self and risking someone else not wanting to go along with it or rejection because, you know, that person doesn't agree with it or whatever. They are very intelligent and often confident in every area of their life except relationships. I meet a lot of my clients, especially the men that I work with. They are successful in their jobs. They are confident in their jobs. They're confident with their friends. But put them in a romantic relationship and it's almost like they show up as an old program. In other words, a program that was put into them in childhood gets kicked on. And they're not that same confident, successful, connected to self person that they are in other areas of their life. They're more comfortable giving than receiving. So their focus is often on, you know, doing for others. In fact, people might mention that they need some help with something, just in passing, not even thinking that the person listening is going to respond. But somebody that found themselves as a victim of narcissistic abuse probably has a pattern of volunteering all the time. Somebody needs something, it's like something kicks on and they want to help that person. So they are complete givers and they're uncomfortable with taking, even small things like compliments. They feel very uncomfortable receiving compliments. They value integrity. In other words, it means a lot to them to be a good person, to be a good daughter, to be a good son, to be a good spouse, to be a good parent is extremely high on their list of values. In fact, this is something that sadly, and you'll notice as I'm talking about a lot of these things, how so many of these qualities are good qualities, but if there are certain wounds that are kind of driving certain behaviors and certain thoughts, then those good qualities can be used against you if they attract somebody that's toxic, and then they're used against you. So it's a good quality to want to be a good spouse. But if that wound that's in you makes you sacrifice what you know is right or wrong, or makes you sacrifice caring for yourself in order to feel like you're good, it's at that extreme where you are hurting yourself to make someone happy, then that's where that imbalance comes in. That's where it goes from a beautiful quality into the realm of something unhealthy and dangerous for you. They're uncomfortable with conflict. In fact, if they could avoid conflict at all times, they would. They prefer not to speak up if somebody hurt their feelings. They prefer not to put down a boundary. They prefer not to rock the boat because they're more comfortable when everyone else is happy. They feel responsible for the negative emotions that other people may have. So suddenly, they're in a conversation and somebody gets angry, and all of a sudden they get very uncomfortable. There's that uncomfortableness with conflict. And not only are they uncomfortable, but they're driven to feel as if it's their job to take care of that person's anger, as if it's their responsibility to make sure everyone around them is emotionally balanced. They have a hard time saying no. So they will sacrifice self. They will sacrifice their needs and their wants before actually putting down that boundary and saying no. And again, they're all these past few ones I've mentioned are kind of tied together, because if they say no, somebody's going to be upset, which makes them uncomfortable with the conflict, which makes them feel responsible for the negative emotion. So they're all kind of interrelated. But I wanted to point out specific areas where you start to see these qualities. They suffered abuse or neglect in the past, and it could be unintentional. Sometimes it's just, I've had clients that love their parents. They have a great relationship with their parents, but there were certain dynamics that happened in childhood which may have been unintentional by the parents. There were certain circumstances that took place where the perception of the child is what created certain wounds on the inside. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if as an adult you can look back and think, well, I get it. It wasn't intentional. It doesn't matter if as an adult you understand that, because the wound is coming from when you were a child. So that child perception needs to be honored, and it needs to be taken care of and healed. A lot of victims of narcissistic abuse are people that view their worth as dependent on how others see them or as what they can accomplish. In other words, they feel more like human doings instead of human beings. And they don't usually realize that until after their eyes are opened, after they've been in a toxic relationship, and then they're looking at themselves, and that's when they realize it. The way this shows up is if the significant other in the relationship isn't happy with that person, or is angry or upset or disappointed, while we care about what our significant other feels, right? At the same time, if that significant other views you as worthless, a healthy person knows that that sucks. It's definitely not something that somebody wants in a relationship, but they still know their worth, right? But a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse never learned how to validate self, never learned how to see their own worth from their own eyes, and so they're dependent on how that other person sees them in order to feel good about themselves. Something else that we have in common is that we tend to really push ourselves, right? A lot of my clients will tell me, Michelle, I'm just hard on myself. I'm just, it's just who I am. It's just because I'm driven. And as we start peeling back the layers in the coaching sessions, we come to the realization that anyone that is usually hard on themselves has usually internalized the treatment of someone that never made them feel enough. So that's another thing that a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse have in common, which kind of leads into the next one, which is they have a harsh inner critic. And sometimes they don't even know it. Again, when I'm coaching people and I ask them what are some things that they say to themselves, a lot of times they don't know. They're like, I don't know. I don't really pay attention. And when they start paying attention, right? If, let's say, they choose that week to kind of work on figuring out what's going through their minds on a regular basis, they'll come back to me the next week and they'll be like, Michele, oh my God, I am so mean. I am so mean to myself. I would never treat anyone the way I treat myself. And they realize that they have that harsh inner critic, which again is just their subconscious programming that's on play. It's on automatic. It was how somebody else treated you, and without realizing it, you've adopted that as how you treat you. Here's an interesting one. A lot of people that start to realize that they're, this relationship is damaging. It's outright like tearing you apart. And yet they realize that, but they feel driven to stay in the relationship and fix it almost as if their life depended on it. And they'll tell me, they'll be like, Michele, I don't know why. Like, I feel like something really bad will happen if I leave this relationship, or something bad's going to happen to me. I'm going to fall apart. And there's this deep driven drive to need to fix it, even if you're the only one working on it, to fix that relationship. A lot are empaths, and usually untrained empaths in the beginning at least, where they can't separate the energy of the person around them from their own energy. So if they're happy and they're excited and they're enjoying a moment, if the toxic person does or says something to them, that person, because of the empathic abilities of the victim, that malignant narcissist has the power to do an energy exchange and kind of take that good energy and transport their negative energy into the victim of narcissistic abuse. They battle guilt and feeling guilty, doing anything for themselves, taking care of themselves, spending time in doing something that doesn't involve them doing for someone else. There's a lot of guilt that comes up. They grew up not feeling enough, right? That's kind of similar to the shame wound, but they just grew up feeling not enough in certain ways. And that becomes a wound that a narcissist can kind of latch onto. And just to mention one more, and I'm sure there's a lot more. In fact, I would love to hear what you guys would have to say as far as what a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse have in common. Leave it in the comment section below. I would love to hear what I missed, okay? But the last one I'm gonna mention for this video is the fact that they don't have clear boundaries. A lot of them don't even know what boundaries are. And once they learn, or they have kind of an understanding of boundaries, they don't know how to put them down, or if they do know how to put them down, then they don't know how to enforce them and make sure that people respect those boundaries. So those are some things that a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse have in common. What's the point of looking at that? The point of looking at that is to recognize that if those challenges, if those characteristics, if those virtues, if you don't learn how to balance them in a healthy way, then you can leave whatever toxic relationship you're in at the moment and find yourself in one again, except the next one will always be more covert. You'll learn certain signs, you'll learn certain red flags, but knowing red flags is not going to heal you. It's also not going to help you to change to the point that you have the ability to have first a healthy relationship with self, and then healthy relationships with others. So take time to go over that list. Write down any that you feel resonate with you, any that you would like to give attention to. And the more attention you give to those topics, the more empowered you're going to be, and the happier and healthier relationships you will have. If you have a hard time doing this alone, then remember that I have a 3-month online workshop with people all over the world that we get together once a week and we work through the side effects of complex PTSD, of narcissistic abuse, so that we can heal those wounds that keep us from enjoying healthy relationships and enjoying life. And the next one starts in November. Seating is limited, so if the videos aren't enough, then make sure you check it out, because I always leave the link for it in the description box below each video.